Hey everyone, welcome to an NFL video. This one we are recapping how I did for week 6 of the NFL season. We're going to go over the main lineup I used, look over the winning lineup and one of the GBPs I used, then we're going to go over my cash rankings, and then we're going to take a quick look at week 7 for Draftkings. We're going to do some initial thoughts, build a lineup together. Now this isn't going to be like a heavy advanced statistic video. This is me just kind of freeballing it, looking what I think stands out to me from initial thoughts, and then we'll go from there. So anyway, before we continue, if you could leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. I really appreciate it. You can also follow me on Twitter at ChrisPinot16. And if you're interested in the spreadsheets I build every single week, links in the description below for my Patreon. And this is just a very simple portion of my spreadsheet. I do a lot more advanced stuff in other places, but this is just my cash rankings. So let's get into that right now. So I said all week I want to play Matt Ryan and cash either him or Kyler Murray, and really both did fine. But I had Matt Ryan as my number one, and he was the highest scoring quarterback of the slate. Went 30 for 36, 356 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Ended up getting 33 fantasy points. He was great. So if you played him in cash, you were definitely happy. If you played Kyler Murray, you were also happy. He scored 31 fantasy points, and again, he just keeps putting up solid days. And he finally got going in the touchdown passing department, where he threw 3, was 27 for 37, 340 passing yards, had 11 rushing attempts, only 32 yards, but still I like the baseline of getting 10 rushing attempts because I'll take that every single day. More than likely, that's going to get higher than 31 yards. So definitely was happy playing either Kyler Murray or Matt Ryan. Those are my two favorite quarterbacks heading into the weekend. I was stone set on playing one of those two guys, so everyone below this was just fillers. But yeah, Matt Ryan and Kyler Murray were my guys. I expected that game was going to be pretty high scoring with two bad defenses, and at first it was looking pretty gross, and then at the end it hit fire, so hit the over in Vegas. So you're pretty happy if you played those guys. Deshaun Watson, I actually had Lamar Jackson at 3, and then I chickened out and put Deshaun Watson in, but it wasn't really too much of a difference. Lamar Jackson scored 33, but Deshaun Watson got 31. He had a pretty good game, 280 yards, one passing touchdown, but he got it done on the ground. He had 10 rushing attempts for 42 yards and 2 touchdowns. So Deshaun Watson, he was fine. Kirk Cousins, for the value, he was a fantastic play at 30. He got 31 points. He was 22 for 29 against that trash Philly secondary. 333 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick, but he was fantastic. Stephon Diggs absolutely balled out. Adam Thielen was fine. So Philly, they're a great run defense, but they really struggle versus the pass. So Kirk Cousins made a lot of sense to me, and if you were punting, he was my favorite guy. And then if you wanted to punt another way, I thought Gardner Minshew would be fine. Saints struggled versus the quarterback position this season, but he was absolutely trash. He ended up getting 5 points, which obviously that's awful. 163 yards, 1 pick, and no touchdowns. So yeah, that was pretty rough if you played Gardner Minshew. Hopefully you didn't play him in cash games. As for the running back position pretty much sucked this week, but all the guys were like over 50% owned. Like in my contest, I believe Bell was 86%, Fournette was 51%, Malcolm Brown was 55%. And like I say always in cash games, just play the chalk guys, because you do not need to be fancy in cash games. Like I did just fine with playing those 3 duds at running back. And I mean, in cash games, you don't get extra points for being, playing all the sneaky low-owned plays. That's reserved for GPPs. In cash games, you play the high floor guys and then hope a couple other guys hit and you'll do fine. So I had Malcolm Brown number 1. I know it was a tough matchup versus the 49ers. I figured he was going to get 10, 15, possibly a ceiling of 20 touches in this game. The Rams looked absolutely horrendous. What did he end up scoring? 4 points. That was pretty bad. Was not involved in the passing game whatsoever, so obviously he was a dud. But at that price with the projected volume, I had to plug him in cash game, so I had him as my number 1. Le'Veon Bell, he was extremely high owned, and I believe in one of my GBPs, I play really small GBPs, like a number of entries wise. And Le'Veon Bell was 86% there, so it really didn't matter what he did. He was just so cheap, and he usually has high volume, and he's just an elite talent. Ended up getting into the end zone, so the 12 points. I mean, it's not, you obviously want more than 12 points, but the touchdown kind of saved him, or else he would have had about 6 points. But yeah, I mean, he was fine in cash games. Everyone played him, so he didn't really hurt you in cash games. GPPs, yeah. Leonard Fournette, he was really chalky, but it's just projected volume. He just keeps doing fine. I mean, he got 17 points, and he didn't get into the end zone, but 20 rushing attempts, 72 yards, and then 6 catches, 46 yards. He's heavily involved in the passing game, heavily involved on the ground. So, I mean, he's just someone we're going to keep playing until his price gets too high. And I definitely like Leonard Fournette this week because he actually gets a matchup versus Cincy. So we'll talk about him in a little bit. Mark Ingram, I really like the matchup versus Cincy. Like I just said, Cincy is one of the worst teams in the NFL, or actually the worst team in the NFL versus running back position. Unfortunately, Lamar Jackson turned into the running back that week, so it really hurt Mark Ingram, but he did get a touchdown to save his day. I believe he got about 6 14, 15 points, so he wasn't awful. He kind of right on par with Leonard Fournette, and that's actually who I was kind of going back and forth with all week on who to plug in cash games, Mark Ingram or Leonard Fournette, but I just went with the chalkier guy, and he ended up scoring a little bit more points just because I thought he was safer because of his passing game work, which was true. And Chris Carson, he did very well. He's one of the best running backs on the slate. He ended up scoring 28 points versus Cleveland. He had 24 rushing attempts, 124 yards, and a touchdown with 4 catches and 35 yards. And yeah, I mean, he's just a bell cow, and he was just way too cheap at $6K. The Cleveland just got absolutely shredded by the 49ers on the ground, so it was a good matchup. And Chris Carson made sense to me. I had him 5th. I wish I was a little bit higher on him because it definitely would have helped me out. But still, if you play Chris Carson, you were pretty happy. As for wide receivers sucked for me pretty much. So Larry Fitzgerald, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say they sucked. Cooper Kupp sucked, but I had Fitzgerald as my number 1. I just like the mid-tier price of him, and I thought he was very safe in an expected really high-scoring game, which it was a high-scoring game. He just didn't do much, but he had 69 yards, 6 receptions, got 12.9 points. I mean, it didn't hurt you. You weren't like excited about it whatsoever, but he's just a good cash game guy. He always gets consistent volume. The Cardinals have to throw the ball a ton because they play at a very high pace, and they're usually trailing. So, Larry Fitzgerald, he's just a guy like plugging in almost every single week. DeAndre Hopkins, he continues to struggle. Now, he didn't, absolutely bomb. He got 16 fantasy points. But when we play Hopkins, we want over 20 points. So, he was very popular. I believe he was 70% owned in one of my GPPs. So, I was actually very thankful he did not end up popping off because I actually did not have him because I couldn't get up to him. So, I'm glad he kind of sucked, but I did have him ranked 2nd. I mean, he didn't kill your lineups just because of how owned he was. And he didn't, absolutely fail, but 16 points, it is what it is. Cooper Kupp, this was the bust of the week pretty much. He was pretty heavily owned, and he only scored 5.7 points. I guess I underestimated the Rams versus the 49ers defense. I mean, I know the 49ers have a good defense, but I thought the Rams could at least hang, and so did Vegas, and Jared Goff just got absolutely swallowed up. I mean, there was nothing the Rams could do. He looked like a mess. So, obviously Cooper Kupp's going to suck as well if Jared Goff's a mess. So, that was a dud. I really like Cooper Kupp, but big bounce back week this week, though. We'll get into that later. Adam Thielen, he was fine. I thought his price was pretty nice versus the Philly secondary. I was hoping he would have did what Diggs did, but Diggs was the one that ended up popping up. But he still got you 17 fantasy points, 57 yards, and got a touchdown. He also had another play that could have been a touchdown, but it was iffy, and they didn't throw the challenge flag because I believe they already had a challenge. So, but Adam Thielen was fine. Odell, I really didn't talk about him a lot in my videos, but I figured he's going to be high owned, and I wanted to get Kupp in my original lineup, which, as you can see on the left, I did not get Kupp in my lineup because then I had about 6,200 left for my wide receiver 2, and I didn't like any of those options. So I figured I'd drop from Kupp to get Odell, and then I got Adam Thielen. I felt pretty safe with all those 3 wide receivers, Adam Thielen, Larry Fitzgerald, Odell, because they both got pretty decently high floors and got some good ceilings as well. So that was my reasoning behind Odell. His price was just getting a little bit too cheap, and the Seattle secondary is not the best in the world, so I figured he'd be fine. And he did pretty much all of his damage in the first half. Still got over 100 yards, got 19.1 fantasy points, so he was fine if you played him. Preston Williams, he was nothing exciting. I believe he only got about 5.10 points. Had 6 targets, which was nice, but he continues that really ugly catch rate. Had 2 receptions for 31 yards. So really, if you play Preston Williams, probably not too happy about that. But he was almost right on par with Cooper Kupp. So you were happier playing Preston Williams than you were with Cooper Kupp. The Mohamed Sanu, I really believed in Mohamed Sanu this week. I thought he'd have not a huge game, but I thought he'd get you double-digit points. Did not do that well. He got 5.9 points, had 3 receptions on 4 targets for 29 yards. So that was a big L on my part. Really thought he'd pop off this week, but just did not happen. At the tight end position, Austin Hooper, this tight ends versus Arizona. It works pretty much every single week besides Tyler Eifert. And he got 28 fantasy points, absolutely balled out. 8 targets, caught all 8 of them for 8 receptions, 117 yards, and a touchdown. Absolutely went bananas. So, yeah, Austin Hooper was great. And I was saying all week, I'm playing Austin Hooper, and then I'm saying screw the rest of the tight ends because I'm not playing any other tight end besides Austin Hooper. I did not care about ownership. And yeah, it was the right play. Mark Andrews, he was okay, nothing exciting. He got 14 fantasy points. Travis Kelce, he continues to struggle with that, especially with the high price tag at, what was he, 7K? He only got 9 fantasy points. So if you played Travis Kelce, you weren't happy. If you played George Kittle, you were pretty happy. He ended up getting 21 fantasy points. So I originally had George Kittle ranked as my second favorite tight end, but the news of the injury concerns, I was like, well, it's kind of scary, so I'm going to kind of bump him down a little bit. I wish I kept him at second, but yeah, I played Austin Hooper anyway. So then Zach Ertz, he did not do much at all, really. He only got, 8.4 points, and at 5,400, you're definitely looking for more. I mean, he had nine targets, which I'll take 9 targets every single day, but he only caught 4 of them for 54 yards and got a fumble, so nothing too exciting about Zach Ertz. As for the defenses, it was pretty much just team punt defense this week. Everyone went with the cheap guys because there's really no sense in paying up for defenses if it's going to cost you a running back, a wide receiver, a quarterback. So I just had the Jets as my number 1 defense. I know they only got, 2 points? I don't remember. Yeah, they ended up getting 1 point. At 1,500, I guess I'll take it. I said I just don't want them to go negative, and they didn't go negative, so I will take that. They were pretty high owned. I believe they were like 60% of my contest, so it didn't really matter what they did. The Jaguars, they ended up getting 7 points, which, 2,200. I'll take that. They were my favorite defenses in the week. Titans defense, they ended up with, what was that? It was a pretty ugly game over there. Yeah, only got 4 points, so is what it is. The Broncos did very well, though. They ended up getting 23 fantasy points, got 7 sacks, 3 picks. So yeah, they did very well. The Titans quarterback position is a mess right now, so Broncos did very well. And then the Bengals actually returned a kickoff for a touchdown to start the game, which gave them a pretty nice floor, and they finished with 9 points because of that. So if you play the Bengals, you were probably pretty happy. And as for my main lineup, it's on the left here. I ended up going with Matt Ryan, who I said was a lock all week for me. Le'Veon Bell and Leonard Fournette, I love them all week just because of the high volume. And then I went with Odell, Fitzgerald, and Thielen. Like I said, I wanted to get up the Cup, but then I hated my wide receiver too because I didn't want to play Will Fuller in cash. So I ended up dropping to Odell, and then it got me Thielen and then Fitzgerald. And I thought that was a pretty safe floor because all 3 of those guys are going to get, pretty decently high targets, and they also have high ceilings as well. So felt pretty safe with that as my wide receiver core in there. And then at tight end, I went Austin Hooper, like I said I was going to do all week. And then Malcolm Brown, had to throw him in just because of how chalky he was going to be. Cheap running back with volume on a good offense, supposedly. Then the Jets defense was just the punch, just to fit in there with the high volume guys. And then the winning lineup in my contest, I say it every week. Hopefully I don't sound annoying, but I'm just trying to help you guys play in these small contests. I don't mean like small dollar contests. I mean small entry contests So this is a $50 contest. I play in multiple kinds of these contests and double ups. I'm a single entry guy and a double up guy. I don't play multiple lineups a week. I just roll with one, hope it hits. If it doesn't, there's always next week. So this is a 45-man $50 contest, and only 29 people joined. And they don't just cancel the contest, they run it. So I was basically playing a double up with GPP payouts. So it was pretty nice. I guess a lot of people don't scroll all the way down to Draftkings. All the pros pretty much are in this contest. So they know what they're doing. They got Chipotle in there, Empire Maker, Mr. Good Seats, all those kind of guys. So, but you got to play in these contests because the scores are much lower. I mean, I scored 147 and finished 7th place. If you score 147 in like the Millie Maker, you're barely cashing. So that's why I'm saying to find these small entry contests, and it's much easier to cash. And a lot of times the contests don't even fill. I mean, 29 out of 45 people joined, and that's just a huge edge. So yeah, that's just my spiel on that. But the winning lineup here scored 201 points. It was Deshaun Watson. He got 31. Zeke got 29. He was very low owned. I actually thought he was going to go a little bit higher owned this week, but I guess not. Joe Mixon, surprisingly, 5. See, if you play Joe Mixon in the Millie Maker, that's going to do you nothing. If in these kind of contests you can play Joe Mixon, get 5 points, you can still win as long as some other people hit. That's what I'm saying. Robbie Anderson, he had that 92-yard touchdown. He got 26.5 points. Jamison Crowder, 15.8. He was a pretty popular cheap guy. He was one of the guys I liked all week as a cheap guy. Though I didn't have him in my cash game rankings because I really didn't want to play him with Le'Veon Bell, but that was a mistake. Then he had Julio Jones at 21 points, Mark Andrews at 14.9. Had to have Stephon Diggs if you wanted to win in GPP this week. I ended up getting 46 points. He was last week's Will Fuller pretty much. And then the Vikings defense at 9. So it's kind of a weird lineup, but it ended up hitting. So, props to that guy, obviously. And then, I played the same lineup. I played the same lineup in the single entries and the double up. So that's going to be it for the review. Let's head into week 7. Take a quick look. Like I said, this is pretty much just me freeballing it. I'm not going to bring up any really heavy statistics. I'll get into that tomorrow. And let me just make sure you guys can see the players' names when I pop them up. So, kind of. Okay. So I did pre-build a lineup, so I already know what I'm doing. But, we can just talk through it. So what I'm looking to do at quarterback this week, I want to hit Jared Goff on a bounce back game. So I know he was absolutely horrendous last week versus the 49ers defense. Ended up getting 2 fantasy points, but other than that, they've been throwing the ball a ton. And they get a matchup versus Atlanta, who is giving up the most points versus the quarterback position this season. They just gave up over 30 points to Kyler Murray. They're giving up 26.4 points per game to the quarterback spot this year. And let me tell you, so Jared Goff was horrendous under pressure last week, but the Falcons are one of the worst teams in the league at generating pressure. So if Jared Goff's got time to throw, I think he's going to be in for a pretty big game. This is one of the higher implied totals of the slate. I believe it's sitting at 54, so it is the highest Vegas total on the slate. I think this could be pretty back and forth. The Rams defense has not looked that great, and the Falcons defense obviously isn't great. The Rams have plenty of firepower. I think we're in for a big bounce back game for Jared Goff. Now, a lot of people tend to, so back in the day, I'm not saying like way back in the day, but a couple years ago when players had bad games, the field wasn't as sharp, so people tend to stay away from them. But people are all in for these bounce back spots now, so I expect he's probably going to be popular versus Atlanta because we just love quarterbacks versus Atlanta. So he might be popular, but I do like plugging in Jared Goff this week at 6,200. I think he's got a pretty high floor and ceiling in this matchup. Should have time to throw. The Rams running back situation is kind of a mess right now, so I think they're going to be throwing, and it's definitely a great matchup to be throwing. So do like Jared Goff. And as for the running back position, I am plugging in Leonard Fournette. Now, I think he's pretty much a stone-cold lock this week. He was very popular versus the Saints, which is a terrible matchup, and he was only 6,700. I shouldn't say a terrible matchup, but it's not the best matchup. Now he gets a great matchup versus Cincy. They're giving up the most points per game to the running back position this season at 36.1, and Fournette is the man here. He's averaging nearly the most touches per game out of all running backs. He's going to get a heavy workload. I mean, last week he had 20 attempts and 6 targets. He's heavily involved in the passing game. The Bengals are terrible versus pass catch running backs as well. I think Fournette's in for a huge game here, and he should be able to finally get into the end zone. I'd be surprised if he doesn't. He hasn't scored 1 touchdown yet this season. So I think we're in for a big Fournette game, so I like plugging him in this week. He's probably going to be the most popular guy on the slate. He's pretty easy to afford, and he's a bell cow back versus Cincy. So I definitely want to get Leonard Fournette in. I feel pretty safe with him. And then other than that, I don't love spending up for any of the other running backs. Now, I got nothing against David Johnson, nothing against Dalvin Cook either. And Saquon Barkley's coming off the injury, but he gets a okay matchup versus Arizona. Points are going to be scored in that game, and he's heavily involved. But I think there's a good value play here at 5K with Josh Jacobs. So he's only 5,000, and he's the number 1 running back on the Raiders. He's going to get plenty of touches. He was somewhat involved in the passing game the last couple of games, so they said they wanted to get him more involved. He had 3 targets, 3 catches, which was nice, and he had a great game versus the Bears, which is one of the toughest matchups in the league. Ended up getting 26 carries, 123 yards, and 2 touchdowns, good for 32 fantasy points. And the guy's got talent. He's really cheap, and the Raiders want to pound the rock, and he's got a great matchup versus the Packers. The Packers are giving up the 3rd most points per game to the running back position this season at 32.2. Jacobs is the main guy here. I know DeAndre Washington comes in for passing downs most of the time, but if you're going to give me 20-plus touches versus the Packers, and if this game can stay close, because we know the Packers aren't absolutely amazing this season, so I honestly think this could be a pretty close game. The Raiders aren't that bad of a team this season. I think Josh Jacobs is a pretty excellent value play, and I expect him to be pretty popular. It's a good matchup. So I do like plugging in Josh Jacobs here. I mean, we get near bell cow role here. I mean, he's the bell cow, and if they're not like falling way behind, I think he gets 20 touches in this game. I'll take that all day versus Green Bay. Hopefully he's involved a little bit in the passing game to help boost his floor for PPR scoring. So I do like Josh Jacobs quite a bit. And then at the wide receiver position, I do like getting Cooper Kupp in here. So he is 7,400. I know he sucked, but I'm all in on this bounce back week this week for the Rams. All in here. It's the highest Vegas total in the slate. Rams have one of the highest implied totals, and he's going up against the Atlanta defense that's giving up 44 Draftkings points per game, which is 4th worst in the league. He is just a target monster. I know last week was awful, so we're going to give him a pass last week. The 49ers defense absolutely ate him up. Jared Goff was horrendous, so we're going to give Cooper Kupp a pass. Other than that, my notes are going everywhere. Other than that, he's been an absolute rock-solid elite wide receiver. I mean, 11 points week 1, but week 2, 20 points. Week 3, 36 points, 29 points, 29 points, 5 points last week, but he's just a target hog. He's got one of the highest target shares in the league, opportunity shares, market share, you name it. I like Jamin and Cooper Kupp this week. I don't know how popular he's going to be after scoring 5 points last week, but if people just look into the matchup, they're going to want to play him, and I definitely like Cooper Kupp. And if I like Jared Goff, I got to like his receiving options, so I do love Cooper Kupp. And then I also like the other guy, Robert Woods. So I'm not sure how good this would be in cash games to go with 3 Rams wide receivers, but I think this is definitely viable in GPPs. And honestly, I wouldn't hate it in cash games. I don't love stacking in cash, but this is just such a high Vegas total, and I really believe in the Rams offense this week. So I think Robert Woods, he's just so cheap. He sees consistent targets, and he didn't have a catch last week, but he had that rushing touchdown. But other than that, I mean, he's been fine. 13 targets, 2 targets. Yeah, it kind of sucks. 8 targets, 15 targets, 9 targets. Then we give him a pass last week because of how bad Jared Goff was. 5,900, I have a hard time seeing him not hit value here. And like I said, the Falcons are giving up the 4th most points per game to wide receivers this season. So I think at 5,900, Robert Woods is a fantastic play. Now, Woods might be the better cash game option than Cooper Kupp just because of how cheap he is, but I think they're both excellent plays, so that's why I like loading them both up with Jared Goff. And Robert Woods does not really need to do much to hit value. If he was a little bit more expensive, I'd probably be off of him with both in the same lineup, but at that price tag, I'll take it. And then I like Larry Fitzgerald. I pretty much like him every single week almost, and he just gets a really good matchup versus the Giants. He's the main wide receiver for this offense. They played a very high pace. They throw the ball a ton. Kyler Murray's looked pretty good, and this is a very beatable matchup. For Kyler Murray here. So in the Cardinals wide receivers, Giants are giving up the 3rd most points per game to wide receiver position this season at 45.4. Christian Kirk was out last week. I expect him to probably be back this week, but like I say, this could always just take pressure off of Larry Fitzgerald. So I think Fitzgerald's going to be fine. If he get into the end zone, we're probably going to be pretty happy. If not, we might see another 12 to 15 point game. But wide receivers are just absolutely killing the Giants this season. You guys saw what Julian Edelman did last week versus them. He's another slot wide receiver. Larry Fitzgerald plays mostly in the slot. So I love Larry Fitzgerald this week. 6,100. I think his price is fine. I think he's got upside here too, and I think he's got a pretty safe floor. This game has one of the higher Vegas totals on the slate. I believe it's at 49.5, and the Arizona Cardinals are actually 3-point dogs, so they should be having to pass quite a bit, and they already passed quite a bit anyway. So I think Larry Fitzgerald's a pretty safe play this week, and I think he's got a ceiling as well. So I do like plugging Fitz in. As for the tight end position, there's a lot of ways we can go here. So Evan Ingram's got the Cardinals, and I think that's probably the most obvious spot to go this week. The problem is he's just super expensive, and he is coming off the injury. He's optimistic that he should be ready to play, but by chance, if he isn't ready to go, I believe that makes the lock of the slate Rhett Ellison at 3,400. He saw 7 targets last week. 6 points, and now he did a great matchup versus the Cardinals. Now, obviously, if Evan Ingram does play, you can't play Ellison. But I'm just saying, if Ingram is out, that makes pretty much Ellison the top value option of the slate. But let's just pretend Ingram is playing. That's going to make... Well, it's going to be hard to fit him in, I will say. So, let me make my picture smaller so you can see. Okay. So, I actually don't mind plugging in Hunter Henry here. So I wasn't sure how much he was actually going to play last night, and he actually ended up playing a ton. So, and he got 9 targets, 8 receptions, and the Tennessee Titans, they're pretty much middle of the road when it comes to the tight end position. They're giving up, they're 12th versus the tight end position, and they're giving up 13.4 points per game. He's heavily involved in the passing attack last week, so I do like the volume there. And at only 4K, I think he's a pretty good value play. And, he's a talented wide receiver. He's a great pass catcher. Got 2 touchdowns. I don't think he's going to get 33 points again, but I think he definitely gets you double-digit targets. And at 4K, I do like the value there, so don't mind plugging him in. If you can get up to Evan Ingram and he's fully healthy, I obviously love Evan Ingram, but I just really can't fit him in too well in this lineup. And as for the flex spot, so I would obviously love to get another high-end running back, but I can't because I only have 4,200 left in cash games, so that might be the way to go. I guess I'm doing this a little bit risky, but Frank Gore at 5,300. I'm pretty sure Devin Singletary is going to be back, but Frank Gore is still going to be the main running back. I believe he gets the most carries, and he's been pretty solid this season. 2 points week 1 sucks, but then 16 points, 13 points, 8 points. It's going to hurt a little bit with Devin Singletary coming back, but I think Frank Gore gets you double-digit carries here, probably around 10 to 15, and he's going up against Miami, and we all know Miami's one of the worst teams in the league versus running back position. They're giving up the second most points per game to running backs at 35 points per game. Pretty much every single running back does good versus them. Even Adrian Peterson, old man Adrian Peterson, had a pretty good game, over 100 yards last week. And Frank Gore, he's also another old man, and I think he's going to be fine here. If he gets into the end zone at 5,300, I think he'll be pretty happy. I think he's got a decent floor here as well, depending on how many touchdowns he gets, 1 or 2 ceilings there as well. And I think he's a pretty safe play. He's not heavily involved in the passing game, and I think Devin Singletary is pretty much going to be the guy that's involved in the passing game. But if you can give me 10 to 15 carries at 5,200 versus the Miami Dolphins, I think you're on a short list for me for sure. So I don't mind plugging in Frank Gore here. And then as for the defense, and we can play around with that. We can see if we punt defense what we can get in. So 3,200, that either leaves us with the Titans or the Chargers. Now, this is both ugly. The Chargers are going up against the Titans, who don't know what quarterback they're using yet. I believe they're announcing that tonight. But Ryan Tannehill, Marcus Mariota, it's both gross, so I guess I'd probably lean with the Chargers. Now, they looked pretty gross versus Devin Hodges last night. I mean, but they've been fine this season. 2 points, 8 points, 4 points, 11 points, 14 points. I'm not going to knock your socks off, but, I don't hate it. And I don't want to play the Titans defense because I want Hunter Henry to do good, so that's just not good correlation anyway. So I guess that's kind of a first look lineup. So if we drop the defense to a complete punt, I don't know what it would get us, but I'm never going to play the Redskins defense and the Dolphins defense. So I guess that leaves us with the Raiders. I mean, they've been fine. They're not like some standout defense, but 8 points, 10 points, -1, 3, 4, but they're only 1,900, and we do have Josh Jacobs, so it makes sense to actually hope the Raiders defense does good because that'd be good correlation with Josh Jacobs because we'd want the defense to do good because that means Josh Jacobs is going to get more carries because if they fall behind, that's going to hurt Josh Jacobs. So that's actually a decent correlation play. This leaves us 6,500. And I'm actually liking what I'm seeing here because I can get Chris Carson in versus the Ravens, which honestly isn't too bad. And he's just a bell cow running back, and he's involved in the passing game, so I actually don't mind that either. That actually looks a little bit safer because, Frank Gore's hard to trust. It's just the defense for the Raiders I don't trust that much either, but Chris Carson, Frank Gore doesn't really have 20, 25 touch upside, but Chris Carson definitely does. He honestly almost has 30 touch upside, so I actually kind of like that one a little bit better, just depending on what you want to do with the defense, but yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up. Jared Goff, Leonard Fournette, Josh Jacobs, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Larry Fitzgerald, Hunter Henry, Chris Carson, Raiders D. Don't love the Raiders D, but I think that's actually all pretty solid. So, yeah, I think that's a good first look lineup. And obviously, I didn't really go over any advanced stats, pretty much just points given up. But we'll get into that tomorrow. I'll do my core plays video. And I think I'm going to do a slideshow of that because I like I did for the chalk and pivots video, so I can throw up the player picture and then I can just do a bullet list of just important stats that I'm going to talk about, and I think that'd be probably a better way to go for it because I know people probably like visuals better than just, it's just easier to comprehend. So anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Remember to leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. Really helped me out. Really appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter at ChrisPennell16 if you're interested in the spreadsheets about every single week. Links in the description below for my Patreon, and I'll see you guys in the next video.